Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner Podcast number 268. My name is John. Joining me this week in the current timeline is Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hi, good afternoon. Here we are.
Yeah, no flashing back here, no going back in time. We are doing this live and in contemporary. I don't know. What's up, Ryan? How you doing?
I don't know. We're not flashing back per se, but I feel like I'm going to end up repeating myself a lot from a previous episode.
Oh, I see. So if listeners go back to, I don't know, whatever 268 minus 4 is, so like I guess probably 264, that's when we talked about chapter or episode 3 of the Acolyte. Also a flashback episode, also directed by Kogodana, I believe is the director's name. And Ryan, you didn't love that one. You weren't thrilled with it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you could just listen to that episode because it'll pretty much be the same thing.
Wow. Okay. See, I believe when you texted earlier, you had said that you had more positive feelings about this episode than episode 3. Is that fair?
I think this is overall a better episode, but it still is incredibly redundant and takes us off the path of like a lot of the interesting stuff that's happening in the show, which doesn't feel great with only one episode left. It just seems very weird to spend an episode essentially showing the same thing again, but like longer and with like a little bit more. It's like when you buy a Blu-ray of a movie for the second time because it's a director's cut, and it's like, oh, there's 3 minutes of extra footage here. Okay.
Okay. Well, yeah. That is one perspective on it, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think. I suppose it comes down to whether or not we agree with or I guess enjoy the choice to center so much of the narrative of the show around hiding's not the right verb, but holding back the information about who did what on Brendock and that sort of thing. You say it's redundant or that, we're just seeing things that we already knew, but I feel like our interpretation of so many of these episodes and so many of these character actions and things have all been predicated on the fact that we don't know exactly what happened on Brendock. And so, to me, it's like, I could see the argument that maybe we didn't need a full 43-minute episode going back and covering all this stuff again. But I think it's sort of like it is inherent to what the show is. The whole way it's structured, the entire point of the show, I guess, is like we want you to be sort of questioning intentions. We want you to be questioning motivations. We want you to be questioning what happened on Brendock. And so I think, they needed to show us what happened on Brendock and then return to give us a different interpretation of it, yeah, I don't know. I mean, at least that's the show they wanted to make, I guess. Like, it sounds like
that's their right to do that. But I think yes, there's a mystery element to this show, but there's a huge difference between, withholding the identity of the stranger and like that being like a core mystery versus this, which in episode 3 the flashback felt incredibly drawn out and unnecessarily so, and now this is like a 15-minute longer version of that episode with like a few extra angles that like really, when I was thinking about it, like the additive stuff here really doesn't add much to my understanding of what happened there. And it just feels like I get that they were going for like somewhat of a, I don't know, like a Rashomon effect.
You can say Rashomon. Yeah, I was gonna say you can say it. Yeah.
Yeah, but like I don't even feel like it's that though. I'm trying to think of something else that would be more comparative, because I don't think it was like strongly enough executed. Like it's so like meandering and weird that I wouldn't even, I don't know, that's almost too kind of a term for it. So like what they did here, and I truly don't understand spending like an hour and 15 minutes of this show on this flashback to essentially say like the Jedi suck, and from like multiple angles, when there's like so much other more compelling stuff happening in this show. You have people like chomping at the bit for more interactions between Osha and the stranger. There's all these mysteries. There's one episode left, and you're like doing this again. I don't know. It's such a choice.
Yeah, I have such a different interpretation of what is kind of revealed by this episode, and I think I might be sort of odd man out in terms of how I am interpreting some of this stuff, because just like chatting in our Discord last night and seeing some chatter online today and stuff, like I think most people seem to be on the same page with you, which is like the Jedi suck, Soul sucks, everybody sucks, and I one of the things I liked about this episode so much is that, and this is not my favorite episode of the season at all, but one thing I really liked about it was that I felt like it made me think that Soul doesn't suck, and it made me think that the Jedi don't suck. Yeah, so I guess we'll have to get into that as we discuss the episode. That's
quite a reading of the scripture.
That is, yeah, and but that's my thing. Like when I'm saying like I feel like it had to be, the show that they're making had to have this flashback early in the season and then return to it later, because so like the stranger's identity, that was a mystery, right? And that was a satisfying reveal. Even though it was kind of an obvious reveal, it was a satisfying reveal. I don't think what happened on Brendock is like this big mystery that's going to be like this satisfying like reveal to the audience in that way. What I think it is that withholding some of this information left us constantly questioning where everybody was on the board, where their allegiances are. Can I trust them as people? Can I not trust them as people, etc.? And so if we just knew everything that happened, and we knew the choices that all these characters made in episode 3 when we first had this flashback, then I don't think we would have spent the next 3 episodes questioning some of those things the way we did. And so now when we see what really happened, or we get a closer approximation of what really happened, I don't think it could be or is even meant to be like this satisfying reveal in the way something like, oh, the stranger is actually Khmer or whatever, like that's being revealed. I think it's more just now I can better interpret those characters, and the choice was to keep some of that stuff shrouded from us so that we didn't have all the answers, and we had to be questioning those loyalties and allegiances and things like that. So again, I understand maybe that's not like satisfying, maybe it's not well done, maybe it feels redundant and all that, but to me, I think, I just think that that's like really the hook of, or not the hook, because that makes it seem like it is setting up this like satisfactory or, like exciting reveal. And it's not, but I think there's so much less going on in the previous episodes if I know where everybody is, like in terms of what they stand for and who they are and everything. So that's one of the things I've enjoyed about like the podcast we've recorded the last 3 or 4 weeks, and the discussion around the show is like, should I trust Soul or shouldn't I trust Soul? What's going on with like what really happened with May, what really happened with Osha, what really happened with Mother Anasea and Brendock. So if I just knew everything that happened in the 3rd episode, then I just think the experience of watching the show would be really different, and I think I like that choice.
See, I don't think this revealed anything new though. Like, I think we knew everything we needed to know about the Jedi when they, like, came to these people's planet and lied about their intentions and their understanding, and then we're like, we're going to
Well, see,
take
that's
these
the
children.
that is the first thing. That's like the first moment. So I guess we should just start going through the episode here, like chronologically. But that was the first, big smile on my face as I was watching this episode, is when it was revealed that they weren't lying to the witches when they first came across them. And that, I remember us talking about that, and that being a big talking point, is like, because Mother Anastasia says, wow, I really can't believe that the all-knowing Jedi wouldn't have known we were here. And like, that's really why you're here, and I know it. And then this episode proves to us that that's not why they were there. They were there researching this vergence. They didn't know anybody was on the planet. And when Sol comes across Osha and May, he's shocked and gets on his comm and is like, Indara, we're not alone here. There's other people here. But just from watching episode 3, we as audience members, myself included, thought, oh, no, they're totally lying. They are lying about why they're there. They're lying to the Coven right now. They were there to come take those children, and that's not at all why they were on that planet. But I didn't know that after episode 3. I only know that after episode 7.
But isn't the reason they were going to find this Vergence or whatever MacGuffin here, like, wasn't that, like, doesn't that imply people?
No, Sol is shocked when he sees those people. They said that because of the hyperspace event in the High Republic books and all that a couple hundred years ago, that there was no life on the planet. Then they found out there is life on the planet, and what's his name? Torben is even like, wow, a bunch of plants, whatever, cool. Like, I'm so bored to be here because we're just studying plants. This is so lame. And Sol says, no, this is like a really noble mission because like life is teeming on this planet and it shouldn't be, and that's because of a vergence. So like just the fact that there's like any life on that planet whatsoever, I think is what they're there for. And everything you see them doing is like putting little leaves into a machine, and they're like, all they're doing is studying like the actual natural life on that planet. And I think that's why, Torben is like, we've been here 7 weeks and all we're doing is looking at rocks. It's so boring, And then when Sol says when he gets on the comm, like he is like the look on his face and what he says to Indara over the comm, completely. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Like to me, that's 100%. We had no idea that this was here, and then they're even like, well, don't go talk to him. We have to talk to the council first and let them know there's actual people here and see what they say. Like everything about it indicates they didn't know that there was anybody there.
Okay.
And so I think that's like what the structure of like the 3rd episode flashback and then the 7th episode flashback is, to say you thought you knew these things, but it's turning out that they're not what you thought they were, so.
Okay. So then after that is when they just break in to the house, to their living quarters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. All right, let's go through it. Let's talk about.
And so, like, when I'm just trying to understand this because this was so like poorly executed. Like, I don't quite understand even what was happening in this like quest for vergence. Like, they decided, okay, we didn't know there's people here. There are people here. They're not going to talk to us, so we need to break in? Or did they talk to them before? How do they communicate with them initially?
Let's go through the episode scene by scene. But I will say that like what happens is Sol sees them and Sol follows the girls, and then Sol comes back Sol breaks in. And Sol kind of watches and sees what's going on, and then he goes back and tells the rest of the Jedi, like, I think that these girls are in danger. I think there's something bad happening. And Indara says, well, we got to talk to the council. And Sol's like, no, we got to go now, because what if something bad happens to them, which is not a good call. But that's when they, so I guess, he breaks in first on his own, and then they break in together as a group after that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
why did they feel like they need to break into their where they
Well,
live?
I mean,
Okay.
you could say, I mean, sure, they broke in, but like Soul thinks that this ascension ceremony or whatever they're doing is
Mm-hmm.
potentially dangerous to the girls.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we will get there because let's talk
Okay.
about like we
There's
should talk
always
about that
some
opening scene a little bit more and the vergence and the force and all that. Um, so it opens up on Brendock 16 years earlier, right? Like that's well, the whole episode is on Brendock 16 years
Mm-hmm.
earlier. We already talked about the fact that Torben is pouting. He's being such a baby he won't eat. She's like, "Eat your food." He's like, "I don't want to eat. I just want to go home."
Mm-hmm.
So we have all that happening, and then there's the
Insufferable.
conversation.
Yep.
There's the conversation about the vergence in the Force, which could create life, and Indara describes a vergence as a concentration of Force energy centered around a location that could create life. So I mean, we hear Yoda talk about this in the Phantom Menace, right? A vergence, you say, like your position's revealed, all that stuff. So it is like totally a callback to, or I shouldn't say a callback, but a connection to that conversation in the Phantom Menace. I don't know if the concept of a vergence has been brought up at any other point in Star Wars. Um, I don't think, I don't remember hearing about that idea except for in that conversation in the Phantom Menace. Do you?
I have no idea. No.
No. Okay. But did you start hearing Yoda in your head when they were talking about a vergence? Like a vergence, you say? Like
Not
that's a
not really. I
oh.
didn't even really think about that.
Okay. All right. So that was like I don't know what you call a Star Wars lore or like a Star Wars yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like I was like, ooh, they're digging into something like a new concept or a concept that's been hinted at a little bit, but we don't know much about. So I thought that was pretty intriguing. And
I did
Soul,
remember M counts. I heard M counts.
yeah, M count will
So
come
that
up
was
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Soul basically like tells Torben, yeah, well, that could be used to create life, and so this is a super big like discovery potentially, and that's why this is a noble mission. And pretty quickly after that, Indara kind of scolds him about that because Soul's like, well, Torben was unbalanced, or he's unbalanced. That's why he's so whiny and complaining and wanting to go back to Coruscant. And Indara tells him, like, you're unbalanced, not Torben. And she tells him that I teach him to find his own answers when he's whining and complaining or he has questions about things. I'm trying to teach him to like find his own answers. And you just gave him the answer. You just gave it to him. Like instead of pushing him to kind of figure it out on his own or seek some kind of, understanding on his own, you just wanted to like placate him or, kind of satisfy him with the answer right away. And then she says to him, that's why I have a Padawan and you don't. And she's being kind of playful about it or whatever, but obviously, knowing that a few scenes later, Soul's going to become kind of fixated on the idea of Osha being his Padawan. Like that's definitely planting a little seed there, that's something that's missing for him or something that he would want. And he's even being teased about by her.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, Soul gets on a speeder and goes and is doing his thing, and that's when he comes across May and Osha. Was the speeder notable at all to you, Ryan? Like the speeder scene?
I mean, it's a speeder going through woods. It's
Oh,
like Return of the Jedi.
well, yeah. There's that. There's that. I thought it looked bad. That's why I was asking. Like I was like watching it last night, and I was like, "Ooh, man, this special effects look like pretty bad."
Yeah, I think that's something I noticed throughout this episode is, and it's funny because I thought kind of the same thing in episode 3 that when I'm not like really engaged with the story itself of episodes of this show, I do kind of see the things that there's been a lot of like I see a lot of talk online and stuff about how cheap this show looks, and how like corny the costumes look and stuff like that, and I think like it was something that, you know, I don't mind that stuff when I'm really into the story and what's happening on screen, but then when I'm like a bit more detached, like you kind of notice like some of the makeup and the costumes and stuff a little bit more, I think. And yeah, I think the speeder looks a little dorky going through there, and I think it's just kind of a dorky design too.
Yeah, I guess so. I like I don't have any issue with the costumes, and in general, I think the special effects are good. Like when they turn into smoke later and stuff, I thought that all looked pretty good. And yeah, I like it all. I think the show looks good personally. But there's something with Disney Plus Star Wars shows where like ships like flying and landing, and then like speeders. I don't know. There's something about that where that I'm not sure why. Like obviously it's a budgetary thing probably, but for whatever reason, ships moving, landing, speeders cruising around, like that stuff a lot of times looks kind of rough, I think. So
yeah, yep.
Yeah, but I guess the big inciting incident here in this episode then is next when Soul happens upon May and Osha. This is the first of multiple scenes that it's like we already saw this exact exchange in the third episode. I think the audio is the same. You know, obviously I'm sure these were filmed at the same time and it's the same director. So probably some of the footage is like, you know, from the previous episode too. I mean, not much. I think it's usually from a different angle or whatever, but once in a while. But yeah, so he happens upon them. They're having their whole conversation at the tree. He calls Indara. We talked about that already. Again, to me, that was like my first moment where I thought like this is an important shift in my understanding of what happened here, because until then I assumed what Mother Anastasia assumed was accurate, but I think, you know, this is a wrinkle on that anyway, you know, the idea that they didn't know that anybody was there when it's not the reason they're there. So then he breaks in, as you say, Ryan, and he sees like that whole exchange where Mother Anastasia is like force pushing the girls down. And I don't remember for sure, but I think he might even hear like the moment where she says like, I forget, I don't know what she says. If she says something about the Jedi, probably not. Maybe she just says your enemies. But she's like, your enemies won't give you any, like, they won't cut you any slack, right? Like as she pushes the girls down. And I thought that was notable too, because as he's like sneaking around and looking in, that's what he sees. Like he's only there for a minute, and what he sees is like this kind of like rough exchange between Mother Anastasia and the daughters. And again, because we saw episode 3, we know that it's actually a very loving kind of moment and exchange between them there. And that is like by far the most intense part of what I would say is a positive interaction. But for Soul, kind of like snooping around, it doesn't look that way, you know? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or not, but.
No.
Okay. All right. So from there, he goes back, he talks to Indara, tells Indara that he wants to consult Indara says she wants to consult the council, and Soul insists. He's like, no. And again, it's because he thinks that because he also sees, he like looks over and he sees that there's this big like opening wherever they were doing the ascension ceremony, and they're standing there doing their stuff or whatever. And I guess he can tell that something is going to happen that night, and he thinks that it is a potential threat to the girls. So I think that's obviously a misinterpretation, and that he is wrong about that. I don't think it's a threat to the girls. But that is, I think, what his justification is, to go back and say like, well, we need to go, you know, investigate this, or we need to go, like, we can't wait until tomorrow. We can't wait until we talk to the council, because something bad could happen to them tonight. So they go. And then when they get there, Indara is like, hey, I'm going to go in alone. You guys wait here. And Torben and Sol talk her out of that. And she's like, okay. Now, this is one moment where I was like, this is not super believable, because she said, hey, like, the smart thing to do would be for me, a woman, to go in there by myself, not have like 4 Jedi showing up and busting in, just me by myself. And they're like, no, we should go with you. It's dangerous. And she's like, okay. So I suppose if the episode's already, longer than than maybe it needs to be, then there shouldn't be a big drawn out exchange there. But it kind of pushed credibility for me a little bit, or believability there, that she would just like be like, okay, I guess so. You can even say the same thing about the previous interaction when she's like, we should consult the council. She folds really quickly, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make.
Yep.
So, but then they go in, and when they get in there, they have the conversation with Mother Anasea, Mother Coral, and everybody that we saw in the 3rd episode. And but this time we get to see like what was going on in Torben's head when his eyes turned black and all that kind of stuff. So that was definitely kind of a new look at the events of this episode, and was pretty interesting in terms of how she appeals to him in that. What would you call it? I don't, that like possession's not the right word, but
kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So what did you make of that whole sequence?
I mean, the last 4 episodes of the show, I have just been chomping at the bit to know why Torben was possessed and why his eyes went black there. I needed to know the specific details of it, so I'm glad they spent 3 minutes on that. But
wow. Okay. So you
no,
didn't find it interesting?
Again, it's like one of those things that it's like, okay, this gives additional context, but was additional context necessary? Like, we understood from the purpose in the 3rd episode of like, she's feeling threatened, she's holding him hostage because they are feeling held hostage, so she needs to like level the playing field. And I think that's all that needed to serve. Like, we get this whole like extra added wrinkle of like Torben being whiny through this episode.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like a plot point because it it hastens some like conflict, but I don't know. It feels unnecessary to me.
Well, Torben's whininess is my least favorite part of this episode, and the fact that his whininess, or his like obsession with getting off of this planet because it's just boring, is like, and that being such a crucial part of like why everything happens the way it does. That is definitely my least favorite thing about this episode, and that was my biggest sticking point. But I thought it was pretty interesting, like that she was able to get in his head and kind of know, like that's pretty, like she's pretty powerful, and like to be able to say like, I'm gonna make this guy's eyes roll back in his head and I'm gonna kind of freeze him there or whatever, is one thing. But like to me anyways, like watching the scene and seeing her be like, I know what you want. Not only do I know that you want to leave Brendok, like I know what you want, and I'm gonna like find this way to kind of appeal to you, because she says your master denies you, I would always let you have what you need. And so yeah, I just thought it was maybe plot wise it doesn't do much, but I thought it was a pretty impressive demonstration of her ability. Again, not just because she froze him or whatever, but because she was able to kind of understand what he wanted and why and all that.
Then how do you feel about when she does the same thing to Kelnaka later and not getting like exposition around that?
Anasea does that to Kelnaka?
Or is that Coral who does it?
Oh, you talking about
no,
when...
it's the Coven, because it's all of them doing it to possess Kelnaka.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I don't, like, are you saying that they should have had exposition around that too? Or you're saying it
I
works
mean,
without the exposition?
I'm saying it. I think it works without the exposition, and I don't think we needed to, like, all like to jump into everyone's heads, like, to kind of get it. Like, I think just, just them, like, chanting and then, Kalnaka's possessed, like, that's fine, I think. So I think it's interesting that they made the choice, like, well, it's important that we see this scene with Torben to tell us something that we already knew about him not being happy, but then, like, then we get to Kalnaka, and it's just like, we don't really need to go into that. Even
Well, I
though
think
that's
they're
like might have been slightly actually more interesting, because we don't actually know anything about Kalnaka as a character.
Yeah, I guess so. Although I feel like they're not really quite the same thing, because like with the Kelnaka, it's just like, we're going to use you as a puppet. We're just gonna, like, we're going to take over. I mean, I guess it's still him attacking. But like, I don't think what and actually that is interesting, because what Anasea is doing, I don't think is like as dark or evil or twisted or whatever you want to say as what they do to Kelnaka later on, because she just gets in there and she's like, I know what you want. I know you want to leave. She doesn't like make him do anything. You know what I mean? But when they possess Kelnaka later, it's not like they're like, okay, Kelnaka, we're going to get in your head and we're going to like, manipulate you into thinking you want to attack your friends. Like, what they're doing is just like wiping his, like, he doesn't have any agency at that time, So I don't think there is a conversation to have where like, we're going to manipulate you, Kelnaka, into attacking your friends. I think it's just like, they just make him do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's after Soul stabs and kills Mother, right?
Yes.
And so, like, they're at war at that point. So
yeah, but okay, sure. But I'm just saying, like, I don't think like like what you're envisioning, like comparing the two, like we should, either we should see it in both situations or we should see it in neither, because it's like the same thing. Like, I don't think they're really quite the same thing, because one is like it's like she's kind of exploring a little bit, in his head and sort of like looking around and saying like, what do you want? And, yeah, it's more like, I would say it's more like exploring his mind, versus later on, I don't think that's at all what's happening. Yeah. But, so after that, like obviously they have the conversation we saw in episode 3. Soul, convinces them that the girl should be tested. Mother Anasea relents. They leave. But another like new piece of information, or I guess a different take on this whole thing, is that Indara is looking at the idea of testing the girls as just a stalling tactic. She's like, we're not going to take them. Like, we're not going to train them. They're way too old to be trained, And so, if you're somebody who, as a lot of people are at this point, who are like, pretty anti-soul, in that moment, to me, it's like, okay, well, this really does kind of fall on him then, because he's the one who wants to take these girls and train these girls, or train Osha. This is not like, again, to me, coming out of episode 3, I feel like a lot of the conversation was, oh, so the Jedi hopped in their starship, they flew to Brendok because they wanted to steal some children, And now in episode 7, it's like, okay, in the beginning of the episode, we find out they didn't even know the kids were there, or the witches were there, and that's not why they were on the planet. And then in this conversation, it becomes clear, I think, that to even take those children and train them, they would need to like do some major convincing to the Jedi Council, who by the end of the episode says, no, you can't take them. You've interfered enough. No more interfering. No, you can't take those children. And Indara is, has the same position here. So, to me, I think that does add a lot to the plot, and it does add a lot to what the Jedi are doing there, and kind of like what this what's going on in this story. It comes down to really kind of like Qui-Gon in The Phantom Menace, where Qui-Gon is like, I think we should train Anakin, and all the other Jedi are like, no, we shouldn't, and then he pushes for it and makes it happen, because that's basically what happens, I think, with Soul eventually getting his way with training Osha.
Yeah, I mean, you said add to the plot, but I feel like it just muddies the plot, like, because it's still, the only person at this point in, like, the normal timeline who's left to represent the Jedi Order is Soul. So, like, he is representative of, for, like, the viewers, the Jedi, quote unquote. And I think, like, I don't know if his, like, insistence on, like, quote unquote protecting the children is authentic, or if it is, like, him just wanting something, or it's all very muddy at this point, like, what his actual motivation is. Like, is it protecting children, or, well, then why does he, like, let one die if that was the thing? Or is it like the Force is telling him to get Osha, or I don't know. I don't think this is, like, one of the situations in this episode where I don't think what is added actually enriches the plot at all.
Huh. Okay. Well, I mean, Indara herself is like, don't confuse what Osha wants with what you want. Like Soul saying, I'm doing this to protect her, or like, like she wants to come with us. And Indara's like, don't confuse what Osha wants with what you want. So, yeah, I think, like, not only are we as audience members maybe looking at Soul wanting to take Osha as potentially being, I wouldn't use the word selfish, because, like, I don't think it's like like he's like, man, I'm going to get what I want, and, like, I know it's not good for her, but I'm going to take her anyway. Like, I think a person can make a mistake, or be making a mistake, or be acting in their own self-interest without, like, intentionally doing that, so I think he's screwing up as most of these characters, all of them do. And I think it's a mistake, and I think it's wrong. But I don't think, personally, it's coming from a place of, like, well, I don't really care if it's good for Osha or not. I just want a Padawan, so I'm just going to take her anyway, Like, when Indara says to him, don't confuse what Osha wants with what you want, I think, like, to him, he's like, well, what do you mean? Like, or I don't think he really gets it. Obviously she's able to see something, that he can't. Probably, we as an audience, or a lot of the audience, can see something that he can't also. But I would say, personally, to me, it feels like he doesn't get it, or his, like, desire to have a Padawan, or his, like, feeling of connection to Osha is so strong that he is ignoring, like, those warning signs or whatever.
Yeah, so. I don't think that's clear to the audience, and I don't know if maybe it's like part of the mystery or something, but it all is just very muddy at this point. Like, I don't really understand why he's so obsessed with Osha in particular.
Yeah, I could see that, because, like, it's basically the way the show presents it is that Soul's like, I feel a connection with her. Like, I think she needs to be my Padawan, and it's just like, why? Well, because he said so, right? Like, there's
and it's that, but then it's also, like, conflated with him being like, we have to do this to keep these children safe. Like, we have to take these actions because we can't consult with the Jedi. we don't have time. This is urgent. This is
Well, he knows that
reporters here. We have to immediately.
He knows that the ceremony is happening that night, and like even when he says that, like Indara looks up at the moons, which we know that ceremony is happening when the moons, like whatever they do, meet up or whatever. So I think, yeah, the idea is that they need to take action before that ceremony happens, because that ceremony could be putting them in danger. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't really seem that dangerous, right? Like to us who've watched the show, it definitely doesn't seem dangerous, but like even just thinking of it from Soul's perspective, he doesn't see anything that seems that dangerous. Yeah. Now there is a miscommunication later on when they're on the ship where May misstates, or kind of she repeats something that Mother Anastasia says, but she changes the wording in a way that would, I think, act as justification for some major concern. But what we're talking about now is before that happens, so that doesn't work as a motivation or justification for them feeling like there's this danger or whatever. So well, actually, that is coming up. Or that is at this point, though, because that's my next note. Because pretty much what happens is they talk to the girls or the coven, and Osha's like, let me show them what you taught me, Mother. Like, I want to take the test, whatever. It cuts to Indara and Soul talking about that, and Indara saying, hey, don't confuse what you want with what she wants. And the next scene is them on the ship, and May is being tested first. And May is talking about the ascension, and Indara's like asking her questions about it, and she says, Mama says Osha and I will lead the coven. Mama says everyone must be sacrificed to fulfill their destiny. So at that point, like, the two look at each other, and Indara stops the conversation there, and if a kid is looking at them and saying, Mama says that everyone has to be sacrificed, that would definitely be concerning language to the Jedi, I think. But of course, that's not what Mother said, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But they test him. May fails the test intentionally. They know she fails the test intentionally. Osha comes in and takes the test. Osha passes the test. Indara says later, but Indara says she passed it with your coaching, Soul. Like, you wanted her to pass, so you like helped her pass or something. And then basically the next scene is Indara informing them that the council says no, they won't sanction. This is the quote. They won't sanction separating them from their family, and also says they've interfered too much. Mm-hmm. So, and then she tells Soul, do not alter, because Soul's like, no, that's crazy. We like May passed the test. We have to, or Osha passed the test. We have to train her. Indara says, do not alter this little girl's destiny because you have formed an emotional attachment to her. Soul's like, that's not what's happening. I want to do what's best for Osha. And then, so like that conversation happens, and then it ends up being interrupted by the M count, Ryan. Mm-hmm. The reveal about that. But, yeah, I mean, I guess like we basically already talked about what, that conversation between Indara and Soul, and how, she's saying, look, you want to have this Padawan, you want to have this connection, so that's clouding your judgment, whatever. Like, we have talked about that already, unless there's anything you want to.
Yeah, I think it's still just this, like, weird, like, they're just the motivations are just so weird here, because we do have that part where May's like, yes, everyone will be sacrificed tonight at the ritual, and they're like, okay, well, let's see about making these kids Jedi. Like, I think if there was like genuine concern, like children are going to be killed, like, wouldn't the Jedi be like, okay, we need to go figure out what's going on with this ritual and throw down if we have to? But
Yeah,
well, let's run those midichlorian counts. How about, and consult with the council.
Well, I mean, it's not exactly that, because they were already running the midichlorian counts, and they consulted with the council before they got the midichlorian stuff back. So it's not like, hey, let's run a midichlorian count and see what the council has to say about that. They do go to the, as soon as they're done, I mean, it seems like anyways, as soon as they're done talking to the kids, they do go talk to the council, or Indara does. And I think it would be fair to say that Soul is much more concerned about the girls being sacrificed or something bad happening to them than Indara is, right? So we don't see the conversation with the council, but the person who's going to the council and saying like, hey, like, should we take these kids? Should Soul take Osha as a Padawan? The person who's going and having that conversation with the council doesn't want that to happen. Like, it's already clear that she doesn't think that's a good idea. She's telling Soul he's only doing that because of his emotional attachment to Osha. So, you know, I don't know. Like, does she go to the council and say, hey, I think these girls are going to be sacrificed tonight because, you know, whatever. Like, we don't know. But I guess I'm just trying to say, like, I feel like if Soul went and had the conversation with the council, that might have been communicated a little more strongly, because I think Soul believes it more strongly than Indara does.
Okay.
Which he would be incorrect about. They're not going to sacrifice them tonight. So, you know, in that case, like, Indara is more, like, her reading of the situation is more accurate than Soul's. But I like, yeah, that's another big thing for me, that, like, I don't know if I'm just alone in this, or like if I'm misinterpreting or what, but like, I think that this episode did a lot to dispel a lot of the complaints about the Jedi, like, as a group, or like what their purpose is. It maybe it cast a lot of doubt on Soul, or maybe it made Soul look really, you know, bad or whatever. But like, we're finding out that the council is like, no, don't take those kids. Like, no, don't, you know, like, don't train them. And then when they go back there and shit hits the fan, like, Indara was like, her whole thing was like, we need to, like, not escalate this. Like, we don't want to have a conflict. Like, we're not going to take those kids. Like, the overall, like, individual people in this episode makes, on both sides, but individual people in this episode, like, make some rash decisions. They screw up, and like, really bad things happen. But, you know, I feel like from the first flashback episode, we would be pretty, like, there's a lot there to just be like, wow, the Jedi are just, you know, like, they are, their whole purpose is to just be awful. You know what I mean? Like, they go around stealing kids, and, you know, I think like this episode did a lot to be like, whoa, hold on. That's like not really what their mission was, or what they're trying to do. And there's a lot of things that should have, like, a lot of directives from the Jedi themselves that should have prevented that from happening, you know, that didn't. So.
Well, I think the issue is, like, as I said earlier, like, Soul is our representative of the Jedi for this series. So, like, his motivations are representative of the Jedi, because he's the Jedi we see the most in this series. But even beyond that, when I said again about how this episode just, like, muddied waters, like, the it's just like a swap of how the Jedi suck. It's like, okay, maybe they didn't come to this planet with the, you know, express idea of, like, stealing children, but, you know, they're still gonna kind of do that anyway. But it's not, like, exactly as bad as you thought in episode 3. But what they did do is they escalated a conflict and then blamed it on another child, and a shitload of people died.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, before we were supposed to, like, believe that May killed everyone in the Coven. It's like, actually the Jedi killed everyone, and then they lied about May doing it. So it's like, okay, well, they didn't lie about this other thing. They were weird about it, but they didn't lie about it. But then they, like, lied about this stuff that's, like, way worse and killed like 30 people.
Yes, they did. They did. But like, I feel like a lot of the conversation after the third episode and just around the show in general was like, oh, all the stuff we're seeing in this show is evidence and justification that like the whole platform of the Jedi, the whole like reason to exist for the Jedi, like toss it all out. Like they're awful. Like and I don't personally get that from this episode. Like I see, like when we get to that moment, like I see that Mother Coral, I'm not blaming it all on her. Like it's not the Jedi's fault. It is. But Mother Coral goes to attack Torben, and that's like when stuff really kicks off. Like that's the first thing in that exchange that sets that off. And then even like when all those people in the Coven are killed, like Indara is not intentionally killing those people. And she's only doing that because Mother Coral was like, well, I'll just possess the Wookiee and make him like, we'll just take over his body and make him kill his friends. Like, it's not like the Jedi just walk in and they're like, yeah, I don't know, like maybe we'll just execute 30 people real quick or something, Like all of it is this like series of mistakes and escalations and like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're on the Coven's territory, so I guess you could just like,
They broke into their home. They detached, the lock so that they could, like, walk in.
Yeah.
They're home invaders.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I just like, I think that. Well, I don't know. I'm curious to know. I guess like, although after last week, I think it'd be better if like the creators of these shows and movies and stuff like wait until after the show is out to do interviews like where they explain all the characters' intentions and things, just because like I want to watch the show and kind of like be interpreting that stuff and not have like the answer provided to me as an audience member. But I guess where I was going with that is like, I'm curious to know like what is the intention of the show and of the creators and the writers of this. Like, is their intention to just like demonstrate that the Jedi are home invaders, they're child stealers, they're really actually the villains? Is that what they're trying to do? Are they trying to present like an example of how? Because we're seeing like duality is this like theme and motif throughout the show, right? Half the episode titles have, two different names. We're seeing like this series of events from two different perspectives, two different times. I think like it seems like a focus or a purpose of the show is to demonstrate like more than one side of a series of events or more than one side of an idea, So for me, I feel like the show is the purpose here is not to be like, oh wow, those Jedi were evil and look at all the awful things they did. And probably if somebody would have just wiped the Jedi out, like, long before Palpatine came in and did it, everybody would have been better off. Like, I don't like really think that's like what it's, attempting to do. So when I see this second flashback episode and I feel like I can understand the perspectives of each side better and understand like how each mistake led to this tragic thing, I find that interesting. And I find it interesting that like, to me, as I look at these characters, as I look at them as individuals on both sides, Mother Anastasia or Indara or, even Soul, like, I feel like very few of the characters wanted things to go the way they did. And so what's interesting is to see like, how did they fumble over their own choices? The episode is called Choices, I think, or The Choice or Choices. How did they fumble over their own choices and decisions so badly? And how did one thing lead to the next that this outcome occurs that very few people involved wanted to see happen,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess I just feel like, all the Jedi are baby stealers and home invaders is like, that's not really what I'm taking away from it,
Okay.
Yeah. I'm also not taking away from it that, the Coven are like, ooh, they're using the dark side and they're bad and they're evil or anything like that either. I just think that it's a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding and unfortunate mistakes that lead to a lot of tragedy. So, and actually, that's the very next thing in this episode is the part I struggle with the most, which is Torben being like, their M count is super high. It's exactly the same. So because their M count is extremely high and because their M count is exactly the same, they must have been artificially created. And then Indara's like, maybe by tapping into a power dense enough to split one consciousness into two bodies, which is you laugh, Ryan. Why? Tell me what your reaction is
during this part. Like, this episode
really?
had lost me like early, and this part I'm like, oh my god, what am I watching here?
So that's what I'm wondering, is this like a world between worlds type thing for you, where you're like, this is going too far into like the fantasy realm?
I don't even
or
care. It's just like, I don't care if this is like disgracing George Lucas or whatever like the chuds are mad about, but like this is just, it's so uninteresting, and we've seen like, it's just up to this point it's been such a like just redundant episode of showing things, from like a slightly different camera angle, that we're getting like little tidbits of like, oh well, this thing that the Jedi did wasn't that bad, but like coming up on this scene, I was just kind of like at the point of like, who cares?
Well, but I think like, yeah, I guess so. But the idea of like them explicitly saying, I mean, I guess it's not a fact because it's just Indara's interpretation, but like, oh, it's one consciousness in two bodies. That's like a pretty big, important idea for this show about May and Osha, who are like clearly connected in some way. And I mean, they're connected because they're twin sisters, but like they have a bigger connection than that, right? People are talking about like, are they a dyad, or like, is this some kind of like, or is it something to do with a prophecy like Anakin was or whatever? So like to get that sort of conclusion from her, I felt like was a pretty, I don't know, important piece of information, I guess, and to the story itself, not just to like the big Star Wars canon or whatever, but like to the story itself, I thought that was important.
I think, again, it's something that could be interesting if it was executed well. But I think when you're like, all the good ideas in the world don't add up to much when like the creation in front of you like isn't engaging.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, from there, Torben takes off. This is like, and I've said it probably 4 times now, so I guess I should stop saying the same thing. But I really struggled with this as like, it just, I think part of it is just like, it's hard to believe that he would be that upset. Like, I'm stuck here on Coruscant for another week. Like, I'm sick of camping. Ugh. Like, it's just hard to believe that would be this hugely motivating factor for him. And, I know he's a Padawan. He's not a Jedi Knight yet or whatever, and he's still a kid and everything else. But like, for him to be like, that's all, I just got to get proof that these two are, created from this virgins, and then we can go home. I can go play my Nintendo again. Like, it's just really hard to believe, And so then he takes off, and they have to chase him. And like, I just thought, like, for a show that to me is very thoughtful and meticulously planned out and everything else, like, for that to be the big thing that sets in motion all these events, like that, just, I didn't like that very much.
Yeah, it just, to me, like, thinking of knowing what we know about like what Jedi training is, and I don't think any Jedi would be surprised by the work that they're doing, like, and so I mean, yeah, and knowing that it's so hard to become a Jedi, and by the time you reach Torben's age, you've been in it forever, because you were there as like a small child, like you know the deal. So yeah, like I mean, I think like again, like this could have been an interesting, you know, idea or something to play with, like the idea of like a Padawan's impatience, like setting all this stuff off. But like in this episode, it is just annoying, and I think that like really comes down to, again, like the direction here. I just feel is really really poor. I mean, it's the same thing I said about episode 3. I'm just repeating myself here, where like episode 3 there were some good ideas, but the way it was executed was just so uninteresting to me, and that like the craft of it just wasn't there for me. So it's hard to engage with the ideas when you're just like not wanting to be watching this thing that you're watching.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I would just say, like, I think in the writing process, somebody should have stopped and said, like, this is not a good enough motivation. This is not like, this doesn't work as an inciting factor for all this stuff, you know, personally. But whether it's well executed in the episode or not, like, I don't think the best director could have saved this for me personally. And it doesn't like ruin the episode for me or anything, but like that, I just don't think is ever going to work for me as like a good idea in terms of setting this all in motion. Like Torben's just real mad that he has to be stuck on Coruscant. So he's going to act so impulsively, and so he's going to risk so much and completely ignore 3 other Jedi who are telling him to stop, because he's got to get on that speeder and get there to get that proof so he can go home and sleep in his own bed. Like, that is just like, at some point somebody should have looked at that on a piece of paper and said, nah, that can't be the reason that this all falls apart, you know? So that doesn't work for me personally, but you know, that's just what I got to say. Now, what does work for me is Mother Anastasia. I have loved that character. I loved her in episode 3. I love her in this episode. I think Jodie Turner-Smith is like really fantastic. And she, in the next scene, has an argument with the rest of the Coven, because the rest of the Coven is telling her, like, you cannot let Osha leave. The girls are our future. You may be their mother, but you are still our leader. And I do think that's kind of interesting. Like, I don't think this will be a popular opinion or whatever, but, you know, there's so much made of like, well, the Jedi just want the girls because, you know, they want to steal them and they want to be selfish and everything else. And Mother Anastasia is the opposite of that, right? Like, Mother Anastasia is like, I want Osha to have what Osha wants. But all the rest of this Coven is sort of saying, like, who cares? She's a kid. Who cares if that's what she wants? Our future depends on her. We need her. Like, it hurts us if she leaves. Like, we need her. We need the girls for our future. And I think that Mother Anastasia's response is very powerful. She's like, you know, because they say, you may be their mother, but you are still our leader. And she's like, well, right now I choose mother, right? And I thought that was very, very powerful. And I think in that moment, you know, I'm looking at Mother Anastasia and saying, like, yes, this is the character that I can, like, believe in. This is the character who I can get behind and identify with or, you know, root for. But she is in opposition to the rest of the Coven. And I do think that the rest of them are acting in their own self-interest there. You know, like, they're not really worried about Osha, and it's not their kid, right? They're not Osha's mother. But I just think it makes it even more of a bold or brave decision for Mother Anastasia to say, no, I'm going to, like, respect the agency of Osha and let her do what she wants, even with everyone else saying, like, no, don't let her do it, you know?
Yeah, and is this the conversation that she's referring to when she tells Osha in both episodes, like, I need to confer with the Coven, but I'll take your ideas into consideration?
You know what? You're probably yes. I don't think I made that connection, but yeah. that makes sense. That probably is the case. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so from there, I'm trying to see, did I not write down the line or did, oh yeah, I did. Okay. So right before that, Mother Coral is alone with May, and Mother Coral is like, you want to stop Osha from leaving, then stop her, get mad. And she pushes her down, or doesn't push her down, but she like uses the force thing on her, and like May like pushes back, and she's like, yes, and like, so she's really egging her on, which I think is intentional because May is kind of exonerated in this episode. Or really she is like, and we see that she's being framed, and we see that there's a lot being put on her that's not her fault. And I think this only goes, this only further kind of like, redeems May, which again, to me is like, this is definitely new from episode 3. From episode 3, we didn't really understand why May did what she did. I think the way it was shot and edited in episode 3 made it seem like May was just like real mad and gonna light that fire and burn her sister alive in that room. Like that's how I interpreted it in episode 3. So to see this episode and learn like, well, Mother K was really pushing her to do something here. And as far as I can tell, the only thing May did intentionally was A, disable the elevator entrance, and B, light Osha's book on fire. And that was the book where Osha was like drawing the Jedi symbol and all that stuff. So like she wants to stop Osha from leaving. And so she disables the elevator, and she wants to destroy Osha's little book of Jedi doodles or whatever. Mm-hmm. But those are the only two things that she does intentionally. Did you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So to me, that's a big change, right? Because episode 3, I thought she was just a straight up little murderous kid, like wanted to kill her sister. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, she doesn't mean to start the fire. In fact, not only does she not mean to start the fire, she tries to put it out. Like she tries to stop the fire. She's stomping on it, stomping it. And then she's calling for her mother or mothers to come help, or, she wants to put it out. So, yeah, that definitely gives me a new rating of young May. And that's interesting coming out of the last episode and going into the next episode too, obviously, like to see where she's going to end up and what choices she's going to make. And then we get to basically like, I guess the last scene or the climactic scene, the big kind of fight at the end. So running through this one, it starts out with Sol and Torben on one side and Mother Anasea and Mother Coral on the other side. It's kind of like 2-on-2, right? And the Sol is like asks how the girls were created, and Mother Anasea has a great line, which I'm sure you appreciate, Ryan, and I do as well. Someday those noble intentions you all have will destroy every Jedi in the galaxy. Great line, and I thought great delivery from Jodie Turner-Smith too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't quite know if the intentions are noble or what noble means in this sense.
Well, sure. But Sol had just got done saying something about, he used the word noble, so she's like kind of turning it around on him, I think. Yeah. But yeah, then like this is when everything hits the fan, because May actually runs in, and which this is confusing because it's May who runs in, right? Because Osha is still like locked up somewhere or whatever. So I think it's May that runs in, and May's like, "Hey, help! I need help!" Whatever, And but Sol looks at her and says, "Osha," and it's like, well, he has this strong connection. Like, why is he thinking when he looks at May? Why is he thinking it's Osha? I just thought that was kind of a weird. I just understand the purpose of that.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yep.
Did you find that confusing at all, or did that stick out to you, or no?
I think it's just again, coming down to the direction here, where
Okay.
it should be clear, but it's like needlessly muddy. And
Hmm.
I don't think he's calling May Osha. I think he's like,
Oh,
oh no, Osha. But
okay.
that's not clear by how it's shot.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah. That makes more sense. And if that's the case, then that definitely would be a fault in the direction and the editing, I think. Yeah. Okay. Probably just cut that out. You know what I mean? Like if you get into the editing room, I'm not an editor or whatever, but you're putting the episode together and it's like, oh wow, no matter how we cut this in, it's going to be confusing that he's shouting Osha's name. Just don't
well,
include it. Just take it out.
not if you're a one word name auteur. No one's cutting.
Now, did you go back and watch Columbus like I told you to, Ryan?
I did not.
No, I didn't either.
Don't
I
have
didn't
much
either.
interest in this man's films.
All right, okay, all right.
I mean, maybe he is an incredible indie director, but as far as genre television goes,
Okay. But I did think the series of events here, like the tragic series of events here, was pretty clearly communicated. And my interpretation of it is that Mother Kay goes to attack Torben.
why
Mother
do you
Anase,
think she goes to attack him?
because the four of them are standing there, and then May comes in and gets their attention, and the other three are looking at May, and she takes her little axe thing and starts lunging at Torben. So I don't know how else to interpret that. Like nobody,
Yeah.
he doesn't even have his lightsaber on or anything. Nobody's doing anything threatening in any way, and she lunges towards him with a weapon. Like they were just talking.
Yeah. And that's where this is confusing. Because this part in particular I found really confusing. Because May says, help me. And then she's like, there's a fire. Help me. And then everyone starts, like, lightsaber fighting.
Well, again, I think like if you go back and watch it, what happens is they're all looking at May because May's saying, help me, there's a fire. And then one of those people, the one who's been the most thirsty to start, like she has been saying, like, witches, arm yourself, you know what I mean? And Mother Anastasia is like, says to her, like, hey, we are not going to fight. And she's like, oh yeah, we definitely are going to fight. Like she has been saying, like, since before the Jedi came back, like, we're going to fight them, you know what I mean? And then in that moment, like the other three people are not even looking at her, like this could be like, I guess, like you say, like this guy just can't direct a scene or whatever. And maybe that is what it is. But in my opinion, watching it back, this afternoon, it is extremely clear that she takes advantage of them being distracted by May to lunge at and attack Torben.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what like starts it off, because like she does that. Torben, like defends himself or whatever. I don't think Soul turns the lightsaber on yet, but Torben definitely does. And then Mother Anastasia shouts no, and she starts to turn into the black smoke. And then it cuts to May, and May is also being turned into the black smoke or whatever, right? And so I interpret that as Mother Anastasia being like, I need to get May out of here, right? Like she's trying to protect May or something. I guess it could be that. Yeah, well, that's how I would interpret it. I was gonna say later on, like Mother Coral turns into smoke and then takes over Kalnaka. So I guess you could say Mother Anastasia was going to do something similar, but I don't think so, because we see May turning into smoke also. So I just think very much that Mother Anastasia was like, I don't want this fighting to happen. I'm gonna vacate, and I'm gonna get my daughter out of here too. What was your reading of that?
I feel like this scene is just an absolute mess. Like, it is disastrous. Like,
oh man,
because you have May saying, "There's a fire, help me."
Yeah.
And then, like, Mother Kay and Torben pose like they're going to fight. Like, first Mother Kay like raises her weapon, and then Torben ignites his lightsaber, and then Mother A starts turning into smoke.
Yeah.
And then May starts turning into smoke.
Yeah.
And Soul stabs her.
Yep.
And then she's like, oh, I was gonna let Osha join the Jedi.
Yeah.
And then you like cut back to Torben and Mother K just like standing there with their weapons down.
No, Torben is being, well, maybe. I thought Torben was being like the witches up on that bridge were shooting their like energy darts at Torben or whatever, and he's like using his lightsaber to deflect them and all that.
Nope, they're just standing there.
Oh, okay.
And then May is no longer smoke and is like,
well,
Mama.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Well, so what you said about cutting back to Mother Coral and Torben just standing there or whatever, that does sound weird and like maybe not the best way to film or edit that or whatever, block it or edit it. But beyond that, like it all makes sense to me because I don't know if you use the word like mess or disaster or whatever, but like I think that's the whole point of this interaction. And again, I think it feels like my interpretation of Soul is very different from the majority of people, and so I'm probably, I don't know, like maybe I'm probably being way too generous towards him or whatever. But like I interpreted that whole situation as like, okay, Mother Coral lunges, Torben, defends, or maybe Torben even is like attacking back or whatever, whatever it is. Mother Anasea is just like, I want to put, I got to get out of here. I got to get my kid out of here. But she like turns into this smoke thing. And I think Soul is like, what the hell is happening? And just like defaults to grabbing his lightsaber and swinging. And obviously like, that's not good. That is not what he should have done. That is a total mistake. But I didn't myself watch that and think like, Soul thought, I better kill Mother Anasea. You know what I mean? Like because then like she turns back into a person. Like he just swings at he stabs at the smoke. But then like, as soon as he does that, she like, turns back into a person, and the look on his face is like, what is happening? Like, I don't understand what's happening right now. And I certainly feel like his face is like, this was a mistake. I completely screwed up. Like, I should not have done this, She's dying. She says, I was going to let Osha go with you. She chose you, which to me just emphasizes that this is such a tragic miscommunication series of mistakes. Like, nobody wanted this. Mother Anasea didn't want this. I don't think Soul wanted this. You know what I mean? I know that May and Osha didn't want this, right? Like, so I feel like very few people, maybe nobody, wanted what ends up happening to happen, and they didn't intend for it to happen. And that, like, to me, that is the tragic element of it. So when she's like, I was going to let Osha go with you, she chose you. It's like, oh my God, we screwed this up so bad, and Soul more than anybody, obviously, but like, we screwed this up. Like, you didn't want it. I didn't want it. Like, this is not what anybody wanted. So that is the tragic element of it to me.
Yeah. And I think, again, on paper, like, that is an interesting idea, and it's cool. I think this scene in execution is so nonsensical and messy that it's hard to, like, pull out any, like, greater meaning, I think.
Okay.
Like, it's obvious what's happening and that it is, like, cascading tragedy. But, like,
yeah.
I mean, there's a way to do that where, the audience, like, really feels it. And then there's, a way to do that where it's like, yeah, this is what happened and it's interesting.
Yeah. But I've only seen a little conversation today, but I feel like, I'm not sure, and this maybe supports your point about the direction or whatever, but I'm not sure most people are going to interpret Soul killing Mother Anastasia as like an accident, or maybe saying accident is too, not quite the right word, but like I personally, I don't think he was trying to kill her, but I think at this point, like Mother Anastasia is justifiably a very beloved character. You know what I mean? And I think at this point, justifiably, a lot of people are like, Soul really sucks, bad. So I feel like a lot of people are going to walk away from that scene being like, yeah, the guy I don't like killed the person I do like. And, I don't know if if everyone's going to kind of like interpret it the way it sounds like both of us are, which it sounds like, or I shouldn't say it sounds like, but I think is how we're supposed to interpret it. But maybe you're right. If like a lot of people are not going to interpret that way, maybe that is a direction issue,
And I would say I'm like 50-50 on this here, because it's, again, such a messy scene. Like, it's really just not clear. Is he just like trigger happy, or is he like feeling this is his only option? Like, I think this conflicts with some of like the ideas that in this show, that the ideas had that, Jedi don't attack first, because like he's not actually being attacked here. Or is he? Like,
yeah,
I don't know. Like, because again,
well,
I
think it's
what is even happening besides her turning into smoke?
Yeah, but okay, but I think it does need to be messy to a certain extent, because I think it's like a spur of the moment. Like, this is an impulse. I think what he does is an impulse, right? Like, and I think so. In other words, like you rightfully point out that an idea that has been hammered, repeatedly in the show, is that the Jedi don't attack the unarmed, right? The Jedi don't attack first. They don't attack the unarmed. That was like in the opening scene of this show, and it has been commented on or reinforced repeatedly. And then Soul does that, right? Soul attacks her. She's not attacking him. He attacks her. So, that's like, we could point to it and say he's a hypocrite. He does not practice what he preaches, right? And I mean, factually, I guess you could say that. But again, like, my interpretation of it, which I think is supported by what happens immediately afterwards, but my interpretation of it is like, it wasn't a conscious decision. Like, he wasn't like thinking, you know what, in this moment, nuts to all that Jedi stuff, I'm just going to stab her anyway. Like, I don't think that was the thing. I think it was just like this thing that he did and immediately said, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? And then I think what supports that is that Mother Coral, who I would think he's much more justified in attacking, like, is trying to kill him or attack him or whatever. And he's just like, no, I'm not even going to turn my lightsaber on. I will not fight back. Like, he defends himself, and he ends up using the lightsaber to, like, disarm her, like, by cutting the weapon in half or whatever. But like, he will not like fight her back or whatever. So I can't reconcile the idea that like he was like, you know what, I think I'll just kill Mother Anastasia, with then him immediately being like, I am going to practice, like, as much as I can, I'm going to practice that Jedi philosophy of like, she's armed. It's not even that. It's not even like, I won't fight somebody who's unarmed. Like, she's armed and she's attacking him, and he's still like, I should never have done what I just did, and I'm not going to like continue this further by like, fighting her and potentially killing her and whatever else.
Mm-hmm. I think, again, like, on paper, that's what makes sense. But I don't know. Like, I mean, you know that I'm sadly never in our Discord. And I don't follow Star Wars people really on social media, so I don't see like a lot of conversation. I don't listen to Star Wars podcasts, so I don't actually know any of this like meta convo that's happening around it. But I think if you're like already seeing people potentially misinterpreting things here, like, not out of like ignorance, but out of just like, I just, someone did not understand what happened on screen. I think, again, that comes down to the direction.
Yeah. Well, and as far as our Discord goes, like, pretty brief conversation in there last night and this morning about this episode, but nobody in there, I would say, misinterpreted or anything. Like, I think some people in our
where
Discord,
the smart Star Wars fans are.
yeah, well, there's only like a very few people in there, so it's like, and when you go out into the wider world of the internet, there's like lots and lots and lots of voices. But like our Discord is like me talking to 3 or 4 of our friends. You know what I mean? So yeah, I would definitely not say like I feel like anybody in there misinterpreted anything. I would just say that like the sentiment in there, especially after this episode, is pretty like not real hot on Soul, you know what I mean? So I feel like in my I'm like much more forgiving of him, or much more like kind of on his side than almost anybody that I've seen online or in our Discord. But I did see people today online kind of saying like having a different interpretation of Soul stabbing Mother Anasea. So yeah, but yeah, it could be, yeah, absolutely could be direction for sure. I think that's part of it, but I think too, though, like I'm saying, like the way the story is built and the way like people are feeling watching the show is just like we're already not super hot on Soul going into this episode. So I think that also contributes to like no matter how it's directed, but that's maybe not as much of a contributing factor as the direction. So yeah,
I think you can always win people over on characters in genre fiction through strong storytelling. Like,
yeah,
you can get people to do a 180 on characters if that's the story you're trying to tell. But yeah, I don't think like characters are ever like fully, you can write yourself into a corner where it's like very hard to get people on board with characters, but you can do a lot with redeeming characters. I mean, just look at Ben Solo in The Last Jedi. Like, when you this is the guy who killed Han Solo in the previous movie and everyone hated, and then you get to The Last Jedi and it's so masterfully done that you get people bought in on that character.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm just a little hesitant to put that all the blame on the director, though, because like, and especially in the medium of television, like I don't necessarily think that he has final say over the story being told, and like he didn't write the script, you know what I mean? And Leslie Headland is the executive producer, and Leslie Headland, like, I'm sure, I know they had a writer's room and plotted all this stuff out. And like the director is more somebody you hire for a show like this to come in and, like direct those episodes. And so I'm just saying, like, I think that there's blame if it doesn't work. I think it's absolutely justified to criticize that director, but I think we should remember too that, especially if it's storytelling, like if it's decisions in terms of the story and that kind of thing, like it's the writers too, and it's not just the director.
It's a visual medium though, and storytelling is not just like the script on the paper.
No.
You can do so much through, I mean, obviously one-liners and, dialogue and stuff go a long way, but you can do so much with just like expressions and, pacing and, all these other things too, especially when we're talking about in this episode, like things feeling muddy, and yes, it's supposed to because of like cascading unfortunate events, but like which is fine, but when it's muddy because people aren't exactly clear and people are walking away with different interpretations, which again is not inherently a bad thing about art, to have different readings or interpretations.
I mean, I got to interrupt you here because you're talking about The Last Jedi being this masterful thing, and like talk about like different interpretations, the movie. I mean, like That the audience, I mean, is so split on that movie, and
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I will go to bat, and I feel strongly enough that I can, justify the choices and the creation and art of that movie, that like actually like if you don't think that's a good movie, you are just wrong, like, or like a weird racist, but like, or sexist, like I feel like that's a strong enough thing, and there's
wrong is an option though, right? Like
what's
you did say you did say just wrong is one of the options though, right? Like never mind.
Just wrong is always an option, but
okay,
I think
okay.
there's also enough thoughtful, critical response and analysis of something like The Last Jedi that I think like I'm very confident in backing up my opinion, and I can say like, oh, maybe you didn't like it, which is fine. Like, you don't have to like it. There are many like movies and TV shows that I think that I know are like really good, but I don't like them, and
sure.
I think that's okay. But I think there is like a point where it's like, this is just like poorly constructed in a way that like hampers the enjoyment and understanding of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to keep pushing through here, because we're almost to the end, the next thing that happens is Indara I think accidentally, but Indara kills the Coven. She's like, I think, really concentrating to release the spell they have on Kelnaka. Again, as far as the writing is concerned, like, did that need to be? It almost feels like, okay, we know we're going to have 30 dead witches on the ground, and we know that it's going to look like May killed them or the Jedi killed them, but we don't. I mean, I guess it is the Jedi killing them, but it's not like people would have, I think, been thinking after the third episode, maybe like the four of them just walk in and like kill every witch so that nobody's left to tell what happened, you know what I mean? Or what to like hide what they did or something like that. Right. But anyways, I guess what I'm saying is like the idea that like they are possessing Kelnaka. First off, I just feel like Mother Coral probably could have done that herself without like 30 people in a room meditating or whatever. Maybe, I don't know. But then for like the resolution of that, or like the to release that spell, it's like, whoops, they all die like in that moment. It's just kind of like it just feels very, I don't know if convenience the right word, but like I'm having trouble buying that. And that, I'm promising you, from my personal perspective, that is not the direction. That is like, as a concept, I don't think that works very well personally. I don't think it's a great idea, and I think on the paper, before it ever got to my guy Kogonada, the director, like I don't think that works very well.
I think, well, first, it's not actually clear if they're
well,
dead
come
or
on.
not.
No, well, we know they're dead. We saw episode 3. We know they're dead.
Well, they like, okay, it's ridiculous looking the way they die, where they all just kind of like fall over like they're going to sleep. Like,
yeah.
I think, again, it is like, this should be something that is like horrifying. Like, it's
okay. Yeah.
It's essentially like mass murder. And like, they just kind of like fall over. What it reminds me of is actually like an oft criticized moment in Attack of the Clones, when Anakin is holding Shmi, and like she's dying, and she just kind of like flops. And when you see that in the theater, like, I remember people laughing during that scene, and it's supposed to be this like very dramatic thing, but because of like the execution there, like, it's like, I don't think it's, I internalize the drama of it, and I have a strong attachment to like Shmi and her actress and everything, and I love her, so like I'm not going to be laughing, but like when but I also get it why people are like, that looks hilarious. Like, it's goofy, and that's kind of what this reminded me of.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that, I didn't think about it watching the episode because I think like, and I didn't have a huge problem with it necessarily, but like, it just does feel very like it's a result, a problem in search of a result, I guess, or a problem in search of a solution in terms of like, we need all these witches to be dead and we need the Jedi to do it, but we also need it to be like, they didn't really mean to do it. So like, I don't know, let's just have her snap her fingers real quick and then all 30 of them are dead or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't feel very...
We don't quite want to show them, like, slicing them all up, but...
Well, no, I think it's very, very different than them slicing them all up because that would be them, like, intending to do that. Like, I think this is not an intentional... Like, I don't think this is intentional. I don't think she's like, I'm so pissed at all you witches right now, I'm going to kill you all. I think she is just trying to get Kelnaka to stop attacking her friends, and in breaking that hold... It kills those witches. But like your criticism of the direction, now that you say that, again, I didn't really think of it. Now that you say that, like there should have been like it should have been more emphasized like how awful that is that they're all dying in that moment. And then I think lingering there a little longer could have definitely helped sell that. And then also, how about like more time with Indara realizing like, oh no, these people just died. I just killed, like you don't really get that. I think you do get that from Sol when he stabs Mother Anastasia, but I don't think you get that from Indara there. So that could have gone a long way to making the scene work more, or the moment work more.
Yeah, because like no one even like looks at them or acknowledges them.
Yeah.
In any way, and they like I just rewound and watched the scene, and they flop over in like a very silly way.
Yeah.
And
even if they do flop over silly, like just hold the scene or hold the shot a little bit, like linger on the horror of the fact that they all died there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And linger on Indara's reaction to it. I don't know. Like, I think that's a pretty good critique that, again, I didn't think of, but I think you're definitely right. That could have worked a lot better. Yeah. The next thing that's also controversial,
the lightsaber fight, I guess.
The lightsaber. Oh, I don't know. I mean, it was fine. I guess it was cool.
Fine. Yeah. There's again, I feel like some of the cuts are really weird, and there's like just some like strange times to cut and like some weird angles, and I think there's like the wire work with Kelnaka flying like kind of looks bad.
Yeah, maybe. I'll just say though too, like I know people were looking forward to that because there'd been footage of him like attacking Torben in like a teaser from before the show even debuted, so kind of a weird choice, but
I don't even remember that. Wow.
It was like in one TV spot, but people see it and then they talk about it a lot and whatever, and so like I know people were excited for it. I'm just saying that I was like, okay, I guess we're gonna see more Kelnaka fighting. Like it didn't really. That's not something I was like super, concerned about or whatever. So.
Yeah, it. I mean, I think it's also just it's kind of those moments in like superhero movies and comics where it's like really hard to invest in a fight scene when it's like, oh, Brainiac has possessed Superman and now he's beating up Batman, and you're like, I don't really care about Batman and Superman fighting, or the crux of that entire movie and Martha and everything. But it's like it's hard to like be invested in a fight like this as much as you are like the stranger fighting the Jedi in the woods, where it feels like there's like stakes. And again, it's like we know the fate of everyone in this fight, so it's like it seemed like gratuitous, and it's kind of like, okay, like I get it as a plot point, but like why is this here? Kind of.
Yeah, and I think too, like I wouldn't necessarily call this a defense because I don't think you really need this or whatever, but like I think part of it too is probably thinking like, well, we're gonna have Sol and Indara like basically choose not to engage with their lightsabers. Like we don't want them to be like fighting these people because that is, that is like ideologically in opposition to what they say they're trying to do here and whatever, right? So but you still, your audience still wants some cool lightsaber action. So let's just have a way to turn them on each other, and then they can all fight with their lightsabers for 2 minutes. And you know what I mean? I feel like that's part of it. It's like fan service or, whatever too, a little bit.
That's a sad reason to do something in
a
story, I think.
I agree, but I think like that's probably part of the thought, but I don't know. Okay, so from there, Osha and May are on this bridge that is split in half, and it's going to collapse, and Soul comes in, and he's using the Force to hold both sides up. He's struggling. He can't hold both sides up. I was watching with my son Elliot last night, and he's like, why don't either of them just run to the other end of the, like, go backwards? Like, you don't actually have to stand there. Now, you could say, well, because they're sisters, and they're like trying to connect with one another, they want to make sure the other one's okay or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the obvious thing there would be like, just don't stand on the end of the bridge that's about to collapse. But okay, ignoring that, Soul is trying to hold up both sides of the bridge. He gets to a point where he can't hold them both up anymore. And he, I think very clearly, decides, okay, if I can only hold up one, I'm going to hold up Osha's, right? Which means I put all of my concentration on holding that bridge up, which means the other bridge, falls, and May dies or falls to her death or whatever. Soul is convinced in previous episodes that, like, before they come across May, like, no, she died. I watched her die. Like, I trust me, I know she's dead. Now I think part of the understanding now after watching this episode is that he believed that so much because he thinks, that he chose for her to die so that Osha could live, right? So, yeah, I don't know.
I'm with Elliot on this one. I thought even in the third episode where we're seeing this scene from a different angle and we're not seeing it from like Soul's perspective or his behind the back or whatever, I thought even then it was like kind of goofy that they're just like standing there like saying each other's names and not just like, hey, I'll meet you like outside. And it's like, whatever, it's that's not how dramatic storytelling works. Like, people, it's not always like logical, and that's fine. I'm not like going like, oh, plot hole on this or anything, but I think seeing it from Soul's perspective here, from that like side view, does just kind of make it look goofy. Like, like the scenario, I think it completely loses all dramatic tension, for one, because we've already seen this scene before and we know what happens. And then two, it's like, it looks silly, like from the side view there.
It does. But then I think too, like, the other thing is that, I think part of the reaction is like, see, this is more evidence of like what a bad guy Soul is, because he chooses to save Osha, and that means he's a bad guy, and that means he's selfish and everything else. But it's like, I feel like the way this is presented is like he can drop them both or he can save one of them. You know what I mean? And why does he choose Osha over May? Clearly because that's the one he's connected to, and that's the one he wants to make his Padawan. So there is, a level of self-interest or selfishness there. But like, I just, to me personally, like, the options are both of them die or he saves one, and that is like a really terrible position to be in. But I think, that I don't think it's like, well, I just don't really care if May dies, so I guess I'll just drop her. I think he's like holding them both as long as he can, and then at a certain point, it's like they're either both gonna fall or I'm gonna, choose, right? Like, this is Gwen Stacy and I don't know what happened in that Spider-Man movie when she was
Green Goblin, where Peter has to.
Oh, the bus. Is it Spider-Man? One of the other Spider-Mans, there's like a bus full of kids and Mary Jane, right? And it's like,
oh yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, this happens, like, and then like there's no villain forcing it in this situation, but like the villain forces the hero to choose, and like they have to make a choice. And obviously, Spider-Man, not a tragedy in that scene, anyways, is able to end up like saving both. There's the Gwen Stacy scene.
Not Gwen Stacy. Not Andrew Garfield.
But anyway, I guess I'm just saying, like, I'm personally not going to hold this against Soul. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think it is presented as like he doesn't really have a choice to save both of them, and if he could have, he would have.
Yeah, I think again that's how it's presented on paper, but it's such like a goofy looking scene that with like so many like there's like such a like an easy the way it's presented visually to the viewer is like the girls could just take a step back and be fine. Like,
right. But that's not on Soul.
No, so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's hard to like even engage with the storytelling here because it looks so silly on screen and it's such like a contrived moment.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Well, then there's one final scene on the ship, and this is like a pretty dark scene in a lot of ways. Indara tells Soul, "I warned you." Soul's like, "I had to make a choice." They actually get up in each other's faces, like they like grab each other. Actually, he tries to walk past her, and she like stops him and is like, like almost like they're gonna come to blows. Torben ends up being like, master, like Torben kind of stops her. Not stops her, but like he's a little bit like, come on, what are you doing? This is not like becoming of you to be acting this way or whatever, which is kind of a neat thing for him to do since he's been a jackass all episode. But he did learn his lesson. He just like a lot of people had to die for him to learn his lesson, but he did kind of learn his lesson, I think, by the end there. Yeah, so then Torben says to Indara, "What will we tell the council?" Indara says the truth. May burned down the fortress and everyone was lost, right? Mm-hmm. Calculated. Soul says, Indara, I must face the council, right? So Indara, who didn't want any of this happen, did not want to engage or do any of this stuff, like at the end is like, okay, we're going to tell a version of the truth. She doesn't say that, but that's what she means, right? We're going to tell a version of the truth. We're technically not lying. May burned down the fortress. They do think May started that fire. Everyone was lost. That is true. They're leaving a ton out. It is dishonest 100%, but she's like, there's a way that we can manipulate like this series of events to, to communicate this in a way that is going to work, right? Soul says, I must face the council. I thought that Carrie Ann Moss's performance here was really great. I thought personally the writing here was really great. And what I like about this is that they are making an immoral decision. They're doing something that is wrong, but I think they are doing it, or at least Soul is convinced to do it for at least partially a good reason, right? She says, why would you do that after everything this little girl has lost? Why would you take away her dream as well? And then she tells him, before you throw yourself at the mercy of the council, ask yourself why you made this choice. So in other words, why did you get involved in all of this, right? What's the answer to that question? Why did Soul get involved in all of this? He's going to say, to protect Osha, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you go throw yourself at the feet of the council. You're not going to be protecting her because she lost everything and she's not going to, get to be a Jedi. She's not going to, like, nothing good is going to come out of this for her in that sequence of events, right? So I just feel like that it is set up, the writing here is set up in a way that it's like there is no good solution here. And obviously the choice that they're making does benefit them to a degree or in a way, but also like it's very defensible in terms of it's like created this scenario where there is no like right thing to do. So that makes any of the choices, I guess, defensible to a degree. And it makes this one that, ostensibly supports what Osha wants as, I guess, potentially the most defensible option.
Mm-hmm. It's weird though. Like, because, you have Indara the whole time being like, we can't train these kids. We're not gonna train these kids. Like, we're not going to take this any further. And then, like, she's the one at the end being like, well, you need to do this. I mean, like, I kind of, like, I get it in the sense of the whole, the whole thing where they, the Jedi these 4 Jedi are facing the consequences of their actions, and, it had to, like, be this, them all doing these, like, bad things or making poor choices, and then it's, like, coming back to haunt them. It's, I know what you did last summer, but, like, I don't know. I think it's probably just because I think about it like the way you described it, and I'm like, yeah, like that's pretty good. Like, that's pretty good writing. But then I think about, like, my experience, like, actually watching the episode, and I was, like, so deflated by this point that I was like, okay, cool. Like, all right, season possibly series finale next week. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, but, like, man, see, I mean, again, not my favorite episode, but, like, just thinking about it now too, like, the scene where Torben chooses to take that poison or whatever, like, to me, it's so much more. I mean, we knew we had to get some kind of answer, and so, like, even the first time we saw that scene, we knew, like, okay, well, we're going to understand this more when we learn more information. But to know that, like, man, I don't know, because, like, on the surface, it feels a little bit like Indara is like, okay, we don't want to tell the council because we're going to be in big trouble. So how do I spin this to make it seem like the right thing to do, but really I'm just trying to save my own ass. But, like, I don't think they are trying to save their own ass. I don't think they are. I mean, that's, like, a byproduct of it. So you can always, like, if you want to, like, analyze the psychology of the choice that's being made, like, you can't discount that because, like, it does benefit them to a degree because they don't have to admit what happened. But, like, then to go back to the scene where Torben willingly takes that poison and is just like, nope, I'm out. Like, to me, that is, yeah, and it's pretty strong evidence that this is not some get out of jail free card. It's not like, cool, whoo, got away with it. We came up with an excuse. Like, no, they didn't get away with anything, right?
On another planet.
Yeah, no. So I feel like there's a lot of weight here, Yeah.
And again, I totally agree with that, and I think those scenes, like the Torben scene especially, is phenomenal. Again, I've said it a million times, the ideas are great, the execution is poor.
Okay.
In this episode, because, like, none of this resonated with me in the way, like, that scene did.
All right.
And so I think I can, be academic or pragmatic about it and be like, well, yeah, like, I can talk myself into, like, yeah, that's really, really cool. But then, like, it's such, like, episode 3, it's just such a messy episode. And actually talking through it now, I think I like this episode less than episode 3.
Oh.
I think it's, like, more poorly executed.
Wow.
In the 3rd episode, just, like, craft-wise.
Yeah.
It's a mess. But, yeah. I mean, yep.
So
it is what it is.
Okay. So I as we are wrapping up here, Ryan, and I will say that, like, you called to my attention some direction choices and filmmaking choices that I didn't really notice watching it, that, like, the critiques you made, I see where you're coming from for sure. And, like, yeah, I think there's some real problems with some of the scenes and the direction there. All that to say, I feel like the final moment is a really killer ending to the episode. And it's a combination of writing and directing, but Osha wakes up and she asks Sol what happened. And, like, Sol looks at her and says, like, May started a fire. And that's all he says. I mean, we know he says more than that, but, like, that's, like, it cuts off at May started a fire. And that is such a, I don't know, damning, such a, like, a crushing, such a tragic, like, final line, is for him to look at Osha and, like, say the lie. Like, this is the lie, you know, that I like, because you know he hates telling that lie in that moment. You also know that like telling that lie is preserving his relationship with Osha, because what's he going to say? Like, well, I killed your mom, right? I mean, like, that's not, you know, so like it is such a double-edged, like, I don't know, but it's just tragic because I just felt like that line really hit, like, like, that is like, I just got done saying I think it is probably the most defensible option that he could take, but it's also such a defeat and such like I don't know what the word is, but it's such an L for him and for the Jedi and just for everything, like for him to just like say that lie to this kid, you know. I guess what he's doing is he has to, or he's choosing to betray his principles. He's choosing to be dishonest. You know, I guess, you know, for the greater good, but it feels like a complete like failure. The way that the line is delivered, the way the episode ends right there, May started a fire. Man, it is it's a killer ending, I thought.
Yeah, and I think it's probably the strongest moment in the episode. But it's like, it's also just exhausting because it's like, man, we could have, what if, like, you know, what could have been if there wasn't all this other like mess in there. It's kind of like the way I feel about like Rise of Skywalker, where there's like some like excellent moments that like I think back on, I'm like, that's awesome, but then like, man, what a mess surrounding it. And like, yeah, it's a bummer when that happens, and when I'm like, I can't fully appreciate this because all this other crap has like taken me out of it. And it's not even being like overly analytic. It's like, I watch the episode and I'm like, I think this was better, but it like didn't hit for me. Still, like, it felt, it felt redundant to me and unnecessary. And then like actually going through and like talking through, it's like, oh, these are the reasons why. Like, I was watching it to enjoy it the first time, and then it's like, okay, why didn't I enjoy that? And I think there's like the reasons come down to the direction.
Well, next week is the finale, Ryan. Next week is the season finale, maybe series finale. I don't know. And
I don't feel like this episode teed it up well. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see where we go with the finale, but
well, I think before this episode we didn't know everything we needed to know to watch like the climax of this, the show and the conflict, with these characters. And like, now I think they're, as far as Soul and May and Osha go, I think we know everything that we need to know going into this finale. And I think those are the main characters, the stranger, obviously, I think there's definitely things we don't know about him that we, I don't know if need to know is the right way to put it, but there's definitely more that we could learn about him. But hopefully if there's a season 2, we learn more about the stranger in season 2. I think there's a lot more like with Venestra that we don't know. And I don't think like one episode is going to be able to, shed that much light on it necessarily. Again, though, she's not like a main character really, you know what I mean? So I think like what this season and the series needs to do in this first, season and in next week's episode is like satisfactory conclude this arc for these characters, like for, our main characters or whatever. And I think it can do that next week. And I think it is essential that we have answers to some of these questions about these characters. Like, I need to know what May did on Brendock, before the finale, or like, or at least I guess as part of the finale, if we didn't learn it here. And I need to know what Soul did. Like, I need like no more episodes of him saying, okay, I'm going to tell the truth now pretty soon. Like, I needed to know what was going to happen. So, like, I know all that stuff going into the finale. So hopefully then having all that information, and I guess you could call this episode exposition, right? Like explaining and all that kind of stuff, like having that all out of the way. Hopefully things can move forward and wrap up next week. Hopefully it's not like a 22-minute episode. I hope it's like at least 45. We'll see. Yeah. Is there anything like, is there anything like
out of the way now? We have gotten this episode out of the way.
Is there anything like you're really like a deal breaker, not a deal breaker, but like anything you feel like you really want to see or need to see happen, or anything that you're predicting strongly going into next week?
I think like, I think you mentioned, you mentioned May, Osha, and Soul, and the Stranger. But I also think we're going to see Mother Coral. This episode, like episode 3, was very intentional about not showing us her fate, and I mean, one can only assume that she is going to smoke her way in to a final scene. Do we know who's directing the last episode?
The information is out there. I do not have the information not in my memory bank right now. Like, I can't pull that up.
Okay.
But yes, we do. Somebody knows.
Okay.
Somebody knows.
Cool.
Yeah. Yep. So, all right, Ryan, we just hit the 2-hour mark, so I think that is a good sign to sign off for tonight. So, thanks very much for watching or listening, and we'll be back next week with one more episode about the season finale of The Acolyte. Until then, you can find all of our previous episodes at blockaderunnerpodcast.com. If you want to send us your reaction to the episode, send us predictions for the finale, whatever, you could email us, blockaderunnerpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Blue Sky, message us there, or you could join our Discord, and there is a link to join our Discord in the show notes. Ryan, where can listeners follow you?
Via Malay on Blue Sky, and where I've mostly been posting on there lately is DVD and UMD menus. DVD menus bsky.social. A lot of DVD menu work.
Very good. Very good. Cool. All right. So thanks again for watching or listening, and we'll be back soon with another episode of the Blockade Runner Podcast.